Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Industrial Software Podcast. As always, you can head to manufacturesoft.com to be linked to the audio and video version of the show or to sign up for the ManufactureSoft newsletter. Also update, I bought industrialsoftwarepodcast.com and theindustrialsoftwarepodcast.com. So head to any of those and you'll get to the right place. Also still open to sponsorships. So if you'd like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to contact@manufacturesoft.com. Without further ado, let's get into the show. Hello and welcome to the Industrial Software Podcast. I have joining me Tyler Bouchard from Flexxbotics. Thanks for joining me, Tyler.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. Excited to be on.
If you want to just go ahead and give our listeners a quick overview of Flexxbotics and tell them about what you folks do.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're Flexxbotics. We're located in Boston, Massachusetts. We're actually physically at a place called Mass Robotics, which is like an incubator for a lot of robotics companies. So at the core, what we're doing is we're providing manufacturing software solutions to basically help productivity for manufacturing work cells, whether that be for automation solutions or even if you have, CNC machines, PLCs, any type of, automation type of equipment that sits within manufacturing work cells.
Awesome. So looking over your product offerings, it looked like there were 3 distinct products called out. There was Flex Reference, Flex CNC, and Flex Connect.
Yep.
Do you want to give our listeners just a quick overview of what the different use cases are for those 3, so we can maybe start with Flex Reference?
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of like separate into 2 different buckets.
Okay.
The Flex Reference and Flex CNC is one bucket. We call that the cobot productivity tools. What those are just software and hardware accessories that get essentially sold with a collaborative robot. We work exclusively with Universal Robots, one of the leading collaborative robot manufacturers. So Flex Reference is essentially, it's an offset tool. It helps basically if you have a Universal Robot be able to redeploy it from one station to another. So that really helps with essentially utilization of your robot. And then you can actually go and purchase a robot, say if you don't have 100% utilization at a work cell. And you can take it, put it on another work cell and be able to get closer to that 100% utilization, which then leads into ROI. So that's the first cobot productivity tool that we have. The second one is Flex CNC, a little bit different with that product. That is a standardized interface between a Universal Robot and a collection of CNC machines, specifically the CNC type of controller. So what we have is we have middleware, and then we have software that communicates on the robot, and then connects the robot to a series of CNC types of controllers. So what's nice is it's standardized, so you can use it on multiple types of CNC controllers that we have compatibility within our library. So once again, it's a type of product that helps with essentially the integration from a robot to a CNC machine, helps you get full lights out automation. And then if you want to be able to actually switch your robot in that scenario from one CNC to another, demand changes, you're able to do that because it's able to integrate on multiple types of CNC controllers.
Yeah, so we'll kind of come back to that bucket and kind of deep dive into it. But if you want to give us a quick overview of the second bucket that you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Flex Connect platform is a little bit of a different beast. This is focusing more on that manufacturing work cell productivity. So at the core, what the Flex Connect platform is doing is it's taking essentially information from your back office business systems, such as your ERP, your PLM, maybe like a network drive, taking that information, organizing it on our cloud-based platform, and assigning it essentially to your manufacturing jobs. So manufacturers, right, have their different jobs that they're going to be executing within their work cells. So you kind of have to build like a recipe to be able to essentially execute that manufacturing job. We then kind of deploy them out into our edge devices that sit within the work cell, and those edge devices are connected into the individual devices that are sitting within the work cell, and also a external monitor for the operator within the work cell. So what we're doing is we're providing instruction sets to help the operator be able to execute their jobs, and then we're uploading the different types of programs that need to go into the different devices. And on the back end of that, we're capturing all the information from those work cells. So we're monitoring those work cells, the performance of them, and telling you how your job's performing and driving that information back up. And you can see kind of it's a two-way communication. So you can take that information of how your jobs are performing and take that and drive that up into, say, your MES system that you have within your facility. So it's really kind of like a more holistic type of solution, and it's a two-way communication between those business systems and those manufacturing work cells.
All right. I guess since you've just explained that, let's deep dive into that bucket.
Mm-hmm.
From what I've seen, there's so much fragmentation between different manufacturers and different, people in industrial applications, as far as what SCADA systems, ERP systems, things like that they use. How do you, as someone who's kind of trying to sit on top of all of that and give visibility into all of that, how do you handle knowing what to integrate with and then integrating?
Yep. So it's definitely a complicated matrix that you kind of have to look at within the different components of the manufacturing process. Because like you talked about, there's a series of different ERP systems that you have, series of different MES systems, and then in the work cell you have a different series of machines, robots, and whatnot. So you can kind of look at it. There's some standardized industrial protocols that are out there that you can essentially utilize and be able to connect into the different devices within that work cell. And what we look to do is we say, how can we provide you the largest set of tools for you to be able to utilize and then connect into your work cell, and how can we provide it in a way where you don't have to have a heavy lift as a manufacturing engineer or manager to actually go ahead and integrate that stuff and then have those data streams being piped up into whatever system that you're using. If you can provide something that is I know this is overused a lot, but that is truly like plug and play, where you're plugging into a device and then you're able to capture that information and be able to communicate back and forth to that device. It takes the load off of the manufacturer having to be able to do that. So we just look at what are the different sets of industrial protocols that are needed, and then use some of our software magic to be able to essentially create client and server relationships between those devices. On the other end with the business systems, you're just looking at what are the different databases these systems are using, and then being able to connect into those and putting that into our cloud-based platform is on that end. For the IT individual that's connecting those in, we're providing no-code connectors for them to essentially tap into their existing systems that they have and then drive that information in. And there's a series of back-end databases that you can kind of create a list of that you build out. So what we've been doing the last 6 months is building out the libraries for both of those things. And right now we've got a pretty good subset of those libraries right now.
Now, a lot of the actual installations of a lot of this on the shop floor might be, disconnected from the internet entirely. And maybe the ERP system was implemented a long time ago and is not up to date and things like that. So even within a single system, there's probably fragmentation between the versions and what the cloud connectability is on the site. What has your experience been like with that factor?
Yeah, definitely. So there's definitely a lot of business systems that are, there's a license from like 2005 that they've been using until now. The nice part is, right, they have that sitting on a server on Onprem at their facility. So when we pipe into it and are actually pulling from that, we're taking that information and then driving that up into our cloud-based platform. So then we're able to take that and distribute that out. Now, if you are a manufacturer, right, and you want to be able to actually utilize the back end of that, where we're actually driving into the work cell, you do have to have some network capability, whether it's internal or you're able to allow us to provide you the cloud-based service. We also have on-prem type services as well, but you do have to have some type of network connectivity to get all those edge devices connected. What we've seen though is that most manufacturers now either have network connections for the different work cells or access to be able to do that, or they're moving towards that direction and understand that it's a necessity. So I think the pushback that we saw kind of like 5 years ago, where people were like, well, I know I kind of want to get stuff networked and connected, but we really don't have that infrastructure. They've started to build that infrastructure now. While it's not like robust, it's still present at least. So it's starting to change.
Do you think it's a certain subset of manufacturers who are moving in that direction? Because I still encounter a ton of hesitance. The word cloud, some people are just allergic to it. Like hostile, actively hostile.
Yeah.
So what are the characteristics of organizations that are not cloud hostile?
And
how do you target for those characteristics?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. some of the more blatant ones where there are manufacturing organizations where they have individuals with titles called digital transformation engineers. So those ones, it's like, okay, you guys are on board. Like you're going to be somebody that wants to be able to adopt this. But it's generally it's looking for our target customer and ideal customer type is a kind of a mid-sized manufacturer that knows digital transformation is necessary, but doesn't necessarily know where to start. So it starts with a top-down mentality that, hey, at least the executives on the team know we need to move in this direction. We may not know how we're going to do it, but we at least are in agreement that we need to move into this direction. And I think if you talk to most manufacturers, they are, they know that there's a need for it, but I think there's a lot of times the disconnect is, well, how do I get to that point? How do I digitally transform it? It's a very daunting type of process. So I think it's you have to be able to give them a path to actually being able to do it, for them to see like, okay, well, maybe cloud isn't as bad because here's all the benefits that I can get, and here's how easy it actually can be. What
do you arm them with to kind of like go back to their teams and get buy-in? There's like in-person things that maybe you do with those teams, materials that you can provide to them, frameworks for how they can see their digital transformation journey, quote unquote. What do you arm these folks with so that they can go internally champion this move? Yeah, one of the biggest things that we do is we allow them to start off with a small amount of work cells to get started. So we don't require them to say, okay, you're gonna need to overhaul your system. You're gonna need to, rip out your ERP, use this ERP, or you're gonna need to, upgrade this type of business system or upgrade your work cell. We say, no, we're gonna use everything you have existing and we're gonna start on a smaller scale. So by starting on that smaller scale, you're able to actually, you're able to, kind of train them up on, here's the different tools that you can use, the different connectors, working with the IT person to say, how are we gonna connect into your business system, work with them, do all of those things. And then once they start capturing information, they start implementing the process control with their operators and technicians. They start to see, okay, this is definitely feasible, and we can see how this can be able to scale. And then a lot of times too, now that you've given them access to the information and you've given them access to this type of, different level of process control, they start to view their manufacturing process a little bit differently. And so the outcomes that they may have wanted originally might change a little bit and change in a direction that says, oh, this is something that we absolutely need to do, and we want to be able to do it in this type of way. So it actually can, change the direction of what the business outcomes they wanted from digital transformation to begin with. What have the like game changer showstopper insights tended to be? Like certain throughput of certain things, uptime of certain things. What is the visibility that makes this a game-changing thing for these companies? Yeah, so for us, I'll talk about what are the things that they care about and what are the kind of the main things. I mean, it's really simple. It comes down to they want to be able to know what's the status of their machine. Is it running? Is it not running? What's the part count? And what's the cycle time? And if you know those things and you know the status, if it's been a fault or whatnot, you take those things, you can build off of those things and really understand, how your manufacturing process. And then if you start tapping into all of your different work cells, now you get an understanding of like, okay, where's the bottlenecks? Where, which areas are performing best? What is the certain productivity at this work cell compared to this work cell? And where's our money makers and where's our money losers, right? So those things are, essentially the kind of core things that you want to be able to look at. The other area that we provide, right, is the process control area, which I think might be more of an overlooked type of digital transformation area, where I think everybody's talking about, okay, data, you want to be able to capture data, and data is really important, and you want to be able to do that. But process control is extremely important as well, too. So arming them with, tools to be able to actually know, hey, am I running the right program? Am I providing instructions to my operators and technicians that are digestible and understandable? Am I giving them ways to give feedback on our process, make them feel like they have ownership of what they're doing and drive that back up? And being able to provide those types of things really have a positive effect on, quality,
your actual physical part quality and the quality of life of the operators and technicians that are sitting within that work cell. So that's something that's really important.
So am I correct that you mentioned that there's a physical device that the operators have access to that gives them visibility into this?
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you want to describe that?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, we have an edge device that sits within the work cell. And
Like a tablet or?
it's an embedded system,
Okay.
essentially. The embedded system has, you basically have an HDMI and you plug that into a monitor. So
Okay.
it's not like anything like futuristic where you have a tablet or anything like that. It's simple. It's just hook it up into one of your existing monitors or, add a monitor in there, keyboard, mouse, and you've been to a lot of manufacturing facilities. So a lot of manufacturers, they've started to put monitors into their work cells. So it taps into that. And then the software we have on that is essentially a guided workflow for them that says like, here's your work instruction. Here's like some videos, some images on what you needed to do. Here's the program that you need to run. Here's like a quality alert that, last week we had this quality issue. Make sure we do this correctly. And then here's the program that you need to be able to run. And you go through that, and then it gives you kind of at the end of it, it's like check mark. Did you do all those things? And not only is that a check mark for them to make sure that they're doing it correctly, it's also an audit trail, right? So it's like when you have something that occurs, whether that it's a quality issue that you catch internally or, a quality issue that occurs, in production with your customers, you can at least have an audit trail to say, hey, we did everything that we said we were supposed to do it correctly, or you realize there isn't something you weren't doing correctly and you're seeing that. So that edge device sits and connects into the monitor. And that same edge device, that's what connects into all the devices too. So that's how we're actually uploading programs in there, how we're downloading programs, and how we're capturing the different information and data from those different devices.
So that's one audience of the software, and that's really cool that they're getting value like that. The folks who are not on the floor, what are their job titles? Who are they, and how do they use the software?
Yeah, so I mean, generally we see our cloud-based platform, which is the centralized portion of this, where you're deploying everything out. That's generally managed from the manufacturing engineer, whereas like, all right, I have 20, 30, 40, 50 work cells that I'm managing, and I need to be able to make sure that I'm managing those correctly. And that's in the cloud-based platform. So that's what's really pulling in the information from the business system and it giving you kind of like, the way to be able to build recipes quickly to deploy them down into the work cell. So they're doing that, building them, deploying them down, and then they're monitoring them, seeing how they're performing. Hey, this one's not running. Why is it not running? And that it can be quick things where, when you see like manufacturing engineers, they're running around from one work cell to another to make sure that production is, continue at each one of the work cells. So it gives them, good visibility into that. But then you can say, all right, now I can start looking at the historical information of like, this job continuously does poorly. Why does it do poorly? And that's when you can start looking at the data and making inferences on like, why that job's not performing well. So it's that for the manufacturing engineer. And then you have like the manufacturing managers and then say even the executives of the manufacturing team, where now you're seeing, okay, I can see my individual work cells, their performance. Figuring out OEE and all of those, nice, digital transformation metrics people are looking for. And then the executive team can see, okay, how is our full plant running? How's the full plant performing at this point in time? And then what areas can we make, capital equipment investments in, right? Because if you can understand how your work cells are individually performing and how your production is performing as a whole, you can really start to understand okay, that's where we need, some automation in, right? Or that's where we need to add a new machine. We have full utilization and our setup time significantly, low for all this, and our cycle time is where we want to hit it. So we do need to, purchase another machine at this point. So it helps them make more informed capital equipment types of decisions.
What does it practically look like for a user who's kind of like, so the automated processes, I could see those easily being represented within the application because there's data coming in and you have the cell there and all that. What's the process look like for mapping the manual processes that are not yet automated?
Yeah, so I mean, I think if you see like a lot of the manual processes in manufacturing is, the information gathering of it is like it is a manual process, right? So you're physically either writing it down or you're throwing it into an Excel or whatnot. So we standardize a way to be able to input that information so that when an operator is doing something, they complete something, they can be able to capture that. But then we're also still providing the guided workflows, right? So if you're doing a manual process, you still need instruction sets on what job you're doing and how to be able to do that job. A lot of manufacturing is a lot of significant amount of turnover. You have both English and non-English speakers, so having an English work instruction doesn't do anybody any good if it's a non-English speaker. So providing something that is is like a video or pictures really can help explain things much better. So there's still a significant amount of value for manual. And then if you think about it, if you have say you have a manual work cell, but you still want to capture that information, you want to put it into your MES. You capture the information within the work cell using our system. It uploads in, and then you're still able to basically push that up into your MES system. So
what does that data entry look like? How does that work?
It's once again, we try to keep this simple. So it's looking at what's the parts that you have. So you put it in the parts, and you go, what was the parts from the last time you made parts? So if you did 100 parts in 60 minutes, your cycle time calculates out to 1 minute per part, right? So it's very simple, and then if you have scrapped parts, you count how many scrap parts you have. So it's really not a complicated type of system for operators to be able to interface with.
But that data entry is not being done on the floor. That's being done by someone who has access to the cloud interface?
No, that it's being done on the floor. So if
what does the input? Because if it's just HDMI, how do they input it?
So they have a computer screen, and it basically
separate device.
Yeah, it's just the monitor that they have within the work cell. So the monitor within there just has the HDMI that we've provided, and they click it and enter it there, and then that information is captured up from our edge device and shoots back up into the cloud.
Cool. Since this is in the wild, with active users, what are some interesting requests or asks you've gotten from customers that maybe you didn't expect?
I think I just kind of talked about it a little bit back there about the English and non-English speaking.
Yeah, so that's something that you couldn't have anticipated, maybe.
No, it wasn't something we anticipated. And the initial request was, well, can you translate this into other languages? And so we were just providing work instructions at that point, and we were like, well, yeah, maybe we can have it where it's different languages. And then we were just like, well, what if we just provided videos for your operators to be able to do what they needed to do? And they were like, well, that's even better. So that customer actually went and hired somebody dedicated to train and build material using the platform to then train it for both their English and their non-English speaking workers. So that was an interesting request where it was a feature request that turned into, well, what if we did it this way and provided that for them? So that's probably one of the more interesting ones.
It's interesting that the kind of as you go guidance is valuable, given that these are repeated tasks. Is it kind of to train new people in, or is it to keep people who are already familiar with the task following procedure?
Yeah, so it's definitely the sweet spot is where there is a certain amount of variety within the jobs that are being executed, right? So this is not something that you'd want to use in a bottling factory, right, where you're running the same bottles over and over and over again, that continuous type of manufacturing. It's really used more for discrete batch and assembly type of manufacturing, where there's going to be some variation in the SKUs that you're going to be going with. So you can have that as tribal knowledge, right? You have somebody that's been there for 20 years, they're going to know their stuff, and they're going to go in and each day, any SKU that comes down, they're going to be like, I know how to build this. I've done this a million times, right? But I think as we know that portion of the manufacturing workforce is retiring. So you're bringing in a lot more, new individuals that are learning manufacturing. And they're looking at manufacturing in a different way too, even, right? If you look at the manufacturing engineers, the new type of manufacturing engineers are much more likely to adopt automation and use some type of different cloud-based system. So being able to provide that and get rid of you need tribal knowledge to be able to do things does help with some of that changeover that occurs with operators. But I think what it does too is if you start using this within your facility and say you have, 10 work cells that are potentially automated and 90 that are manual, once you start seeing the performance of each one of your work cells, you'll understand, oh, I need to start investing more into automation and into these other types of work cells. So it gives you that kind of visibility into how all of your work cells are performing. And you can see blatantly like, oh, these are where some of the issues are. And start having maybe your operators focusing and working in conjunction with the robots as opposed to just, working themselves alone in the work cell.
So overall, this type of product to me sounds like what would be sold as a SaaS subscription piece of software. Is that the case?
Yep, that's correct. It's an operational tool at the end of the day, and it's funny too, right? We have the two product buckets that I was talking about.
Yeah.
We sell the cobot productivity tools as it's a capital equipment investment, right? It's a one-time purchase it, buy it with a robot, and you own it at that point. This is more of an operational tool, so it's something that you're using kind of on a day-to-day basis, and it's connecting within all of your manufacturing process. So it is essentially sold like you're saying as a SaaS type of model.
Is that something that's novel for a lot of your customers, and what have their reactions to that been?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely in early on. It is kind of some mixed feelings on it, but it kind of goes back to what you were saying before, where it's like, well, where do you look at your kind of ideal customer type? So if we have a customer that says, I don't want anything to do with recurring model and whatnot, then that's fine. It maybe not is not a right fit. But there's a lot of customers that are definitely fine with doing that, because if you think about it, there are a lot of business systems that are out there that are sold on a recurring basis, and manufacturers pay it on an annual basis. So you can view this as something that sits adjunct to your business systems and enhances the productivity of your work cell. So in that regard, when people view it that way, there's not necessarily pushback in how it's done. And when you're selling in a SaaS type of model, capital equipment, high cost upfront, right? So you're putting a lot of money into doing this. Because this is sold as, in a SaaS model, you're actually able to kind of lower the upfront costs that are needed for it, and be able to scale with it over time. So you can start off small, and then you can scale to something that's larger. And even the larger annual price is still, over that kind of 10-year period. If you include the capital equipment, maintenance, everything that's included with that, you're going to come out with a cost that's comparable to especially what the output of platforms like this are providing.
For sure. Do you have connections or relationships with peers who also sell in this space in this way? It's kind of like a newer, fresher take on how to sell software in this space. Do you have relationships with others doing this when you kind of compare notes and swap stories and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have organizations that you'll be seeing some partner announcements that'll be happening soon, where we're actually building ecosystem of partners that are providing solutions that are in a similar type of SaaS model, but that are kind of like the infrastructure needed to be able to fully run manufacturing work cells and help with your full manufacturing process. So it is new, I would say, and I would say that the environment for this started back in if you look at the capital investment from venture capitalists investing into this field. It was you either come in with a SaaS model or we kind of shy away from making investments. So long about 4 or 5 years ago, they made that shift on there, and it forced kind of companies to be able to move into that direction. On the back end of it, though, is a reason why it's being done. It's more beneficial for manufacturers and for the companies that are selling the products to have it in that type of fashion. So that's kind of some of the environment. But yeah, definitely a lot of individuals where if you talk to them, it takes a little bit of time and understanding to say, okay, how do we provide this in a way that makes sense for the manufacturers to be able to utilize using a SaaS model? And it has to be something where it's what we've come to the conclusion is it has to be something where it's easy for them to start. And if they look at scaling, it's still reasonable for them to be able to afford something like this.
One thing that you mentioned is that a lot of these folks have on-prem servers, and then you kind of go from there to your system. What is I actually don't know. What does the world of on-prem servers look like? Like, what kinds of hardware is this, and what is it running? Is it like Linux boxes in the back room, or like, I don't actually know. What is that world like?
Yeah, I'm actually not that much of an expert on on-prem servers as well. It's one of those things where we provide it as an offering. My counterpart, who's also named Tyler Medelsky, our CTO, could talk at lengths about it. But I mean, at the end of the day, what we're providing is, instead of providing something that's like a continuous updated type of product, we're providing it in like a one-time, like, here's the software license. And then, if you want to update it, you got to go and manually update it at that point. So it's a different kind of model to it. It's interesting. We haven't had any customers that have wanted to do on-prem yet. They asked for it in the beginning, but then when you talk about how secure the cloud-based platform is and how easy it is to actually be able to utilize, that kind of fear of using a cloud-based platform tends to go away, and they start to be able to feel much more comfortable with it.
Yeah. All right. If we want to maybe flip to your other bucket of products, which we haven't even gotten to, so if you want to kind of just overview that bucket again.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was talking about before the Flex reference. So it's a software and hardware solution that helps you redeploy your robot. What it's basically doing is it's providing you a reference location for your robot to provide like an offset for it. So you're mechanically mating it together, and then using essentially the position from when you had your robot originally programmed in position to another position, taking that difference and applying that offset to your program at that point. So it really, what we looked at was the redeployment process. Why do people not want to redeploy their robots, right? Because you talk to certain people and it's like, well, yeah, my customers keep their robots fixed, and you go, okay, but why are they keeping their robots fixed? And if they had the ability to easily move it, would they? So we kind of asked those questions when developing that, and we came up with a product where we said, all right, this has to be something that's easy to use, that can be done to on the operator level be able to use. It needs to be plug-in. And it needs to be something that's competitive enough that makes sense it's a no-brainer for people to say, well, if I can have the ability to move from one work cell to another, absolutely, I need something like this. So it takes about 5 minutes for a manufacturer to essentially do the actual offsetting portion. The full redeployment process takes about 30 minutes in whole. There's a good case study actually that Universal Robots did with one of our customers, AIM Processing, over in Colorado, and talked about how this drove the decision to purchasing robot and helped them be able to conduct redeployments on every single shift that they have. Because we reduce the complexity that it takes, it's basically like 3 steps. 3 buttons on Universal Robots Polyscope interface. You can be able to give it to an operator and have them successfully execute a redeployment. So on 3rd shift, they're doing redeployments there and being able to have that robot running essentially continuously.
All right. So it's been mentioned a couple of times that you're part of the Universal Robots UR Plus partner program. Yep. And how did that relationship start?
It's funny, yeah. We essentially, saw that they had the UR Plus program. We had, we saw, we were implementing, some Universal Robots. Actually, Tyler at his current, former workplace was implementing Universal Robots and saw, the need for this. And we reached out. They had an easy way for us to be able to connect with them. They gave us the SDK, or software development kit, and we were kind of off and running from there. So that it was very, seamless process for us to become, early product developers, for a product to be able to plug into their system. I mean, I think they've done a really, really good job in an innovative way of creating an ecosystem for their robot to, instill a significant amount of innovation rapid innovation within their robot and a lot of supporting type of products. So it was a low barrier of entry for us to be able to get in there. At the beginning, we had very little capital, so it was something that was not a pay to play type of deal. We could scale our way up and do it, and it was easy for us to be able to start developing on. And then for them, it provided something where, hey, there's some innovation that's being instilled into being used with their robot. So we started off with that, and we've been doing that ever since with them, and created a great partnership.
Have they played a role in customer acquisition for you, like introducing their customers to Flexxbotics' products as possibilities?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
and has that been how significant of a percentage of your customer acquisition has that been?
That's a good question. Quantifying it, I mean, customer acquisition is always a difficult thing to quantify, but I would say what they've done is they've been able to provide introductions to various partners. They have a very robust partner network, that is essentially distributing and selling, the universal robots along with the other peripherals. So they make a lot of those introductions in there, basically get your foot in the door for you to be able to start communicating with those partners. And then they have access to direct to customers too that they're working with, that they advocate for it. So, it's one of those things where I would say the combination of it, I mean, 90% of our cobot productivity tools are sold through partners. So if you want to use that stat, we've utilized the universal robot partner base to be able to sell those products. So, whether it's us pounding the pavement or them making introductions, 90% of that has come from their partner network.
Once you have, an active, passionate customer base and partner network, you have a lot of great sources of product need. Your customers saying, I need this, I need that, and your partners say the same. But before you get that flywheel going, it's very difficult to spot a niche in the market. So how did you spark that flywheel and spot the first need? And what was the first product offering that latched for Flexxbotics?
So yeah, before I go into that, I will talk about what you were just talking about, using that need within your customer base. That's Flex Connect, the platform we were talking about originally. That came from a lot of that customer discovery and talking with those customers that we already had by selling our cobot productivity tools. The Flex reference itself, it came from basically implementing a universal robot and finding that there were some operational things that were kind of needed to make that redeployment process a little bit easier, and so basically taking the jump that I think people will want to utilize this on multiple work cells. And the only reason they're staying fixed is because it's too difficult for them to be able to do that. So that really was kind of saying, all right, we'll take the gamble that people are going to want to move their robots if we make it easy enough for them. So that started with Flex Reference. Flex CNC was something that was also customer discovery and a lot of partner discovery too, because we had less customers at that point. But finding that there was definitely much more of a need for people to be able to integrate within their CNC machines, integrate the universal robots with their CNC machines, and it aligns well with the Flex Connect platform as well too, because we're building a library of things that we can be able to integrate and communicate with, which is similar, kind of roadmap and architecture of how the Flex Connect platform works as well.
I was looking at the actual user guides for hooking up your CNC machines to the Flex CNC.
Yeah.
It's really nitty gritty, and you got to plug this into this thing in this panel and this. It's very clearly laid out instructions. But it made me wonder, how did you get access to all these machines to develop this, to know specifically where to plug each thing in, and for your software team to build the integration? I have to imagine you had to have physical access to these machines, which are expensive, not common machines. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we leaned pretty heavily on our partner network to be able to help with that. Local partner, Robert E. Morris company. I'll give a shout out to Mike Locke. Helped significantly with giving us access to a lot of the CNC machines that he had at his facility. We couldn't buy all the CNC machines that we worked on. Some of it, sometimes you fly down to a customer that's a little bit more forgiving, and you say, hey, I'm going to work on your machine for a week, and you get it up and running by the end of the week. Which is like, in a way, right, it's similar to some of the integration process, but what we do is we just then standardize it and kind of productize it. It's nitty gritty, and it's fragmented. And that's why it makes it for such a tough problem for people when they're looking to integrate their robots onto their CNC machines, because there's so much different nuances and knowledge and specifics that are around each CNC machine that you have, that it's very difficult for you to be able to essentially standardize on it. So part of what we provide is not only the standardized solution, but the standardized set of instructions that for each one that you need to be able to do, here's how you're able to do it. We support, on how to do that. So it's like, as long as you have like a basic understanding of how to be able to wire something, then your basic, robot programming and your basic CNC programming, you'll be able to get this up and running in half a day.
A lot of these installations are done with customers that you probably have a long-term relationship with, and a lot of back and forth between you and them for getting them set up, and then once they're set up, the long term of supporting their needs and things like that. How is this relationship managed? Like, is it done through like a CRM? And like, then if 2 years later they reach out to you and say, hey, we got an updated version on this panel, we need to figure this out. How does this, and then for you as a company, you must have a huge volume of manual customer interaction and support that you do. So how is this all managed on the back end?
Yeah, I mean, if I was going to sit here and say that we have a completely organized and robust way of doing this, I'd be lying to you. And I think any company, even the most organized ones, it's always kind of like, a rat's nest of being able to handle that. But I mean, what we do is, we use a CRM system, of course, to be able to kind of manage, the different, customers that we're working with. But we have, a really good set of individuals that, know the product in and out, right? So, we're a team of 9 people, so we're a very small organization. But what we do have is we have intimate knowledge of both, we'll say for the Flex CNC portion, we know very well how the universal robot works, and we know very well how the different CNC machines work. So almost to the point of, how well the CNC machinist and whatnot knows, how their CNC machine works. So by working with them on that, we're able to, kind of push through any issues that they're having. And then on the back end, I mean, we're just essentially managing that within our CRM system to say, what issue did they have? Was it resolved? And was it something that was an issue that was, user error, or was this an actual bug, or was this something that should be a new feature request? We categorize those 3 things, and then we include those in, we use Jira, and we have an agile development process. So we basically backfill those up into, if they're a feature request, all right, it's added to the backlog and look at that. So a lot of the customer interactions that we have, they usually benefit in a lot of product innovation as well. And I think that's really important, especially as a small company or a big company, listening to your customers and understanding what they truly want can help you solve in the short term. And then by seeing kind of the trends, you can start to predict what are the next things that they're going to be asking for, and providing those types of things. With
a lot of your product offerings, there seemed to be a dedicated hardware component. So I guess I'll just zoom back out. At a team size of 9 people, I've seen this a lot in industrial startups so far. Like, coming from like a software specific startup environment, it's very hyper focused. We do one thing, it's one piece of software, we edit out everything, that isn't, directly aligned with that one small thing that we do. But then coming to the industrial space is very interesting. Almost everyone I've encountered does software, hardware, and services as a small team. It's
Yeah.
super counterintuitive and interesting. So
Yeah.
why do you think that is? Do you think that that's going to change, and how do you manage that?
Yeah, I think it comes down to manufacturing is just it's physical, right? Like you're physically doing something within a work cell, and you're physically connecting into things. It's just like robotics, right? Robotics at the end of the day, like the robotic leaders are the ones that have software and ecosystems, right? Those are the ones that are doing well. And so, but their hardware at the end of the day has to enable them to be able to do that. So hardware in that sense is absolutely an enabler. And because of the the drive to getting to interoperability between systems, you have to be able to provide a certain amount of support in what you're doing. I think the goal is how much of that support can you drive down? How can you reduce that support and provide something that 95% out of the box is going to get you to where you need to go, and that last 5%, if you have general understanding of certain things, you're going to be able to get to that point. So I think it is interesting to see that is the way within manufacturing, but I think it comes down to is at the end of the day, you're literally building something and physically having things that are building it. So you have to have software to communicate with them. You have to have hardware that is making the physical connections within it. And then the know-how portion is you got to be able to provide some support to it. Which I think if you look at software only types of solutions, support is probably it is a significant portion of the overhead that's included. So I think it's definitely something that's software only is not immune to handling that support portion. I think it's the hardware that's like definitely the X factor that manufacturing companies need to provide.
I think there's been a renewed interest on the part of venture capitalists in this space, even over just since COVID, basically.
Yeah.
And you already mentioned that from that subset, from that community, there was some kind of nudging towards the SaaS model, which totally makes sense.
Yeah.
How have they reacted to the fact, or like not your company, but a lot of companies in this space, the fact that they do hardware, for example, which a lot of VCs are like either specialized in and that's their lane, or they're just like allergic to it. Yeah. What have you encountered as far as that?
Yeah, it's been interesting. Sometimes I don't think they understand totally where the hardware is incorporated within it too. I've talked to some VCs where they say, yeah, well, no, we're not into hardware. And I look at some of their portfolio companies and I go, well, they're utilizing hardware actually. That company, maybe they don't say that they're doing hardware, but they are doing actual hardware. I think it's what it looks at is what is the hardware component doing, right? Because if the hardware is very specialized and it's custom, and you're having to make iterations on that, hardware development is difficult. It's time intensive. There's supply chain that's involved with it, and development on it is much more difficult. So if you're having to use something that is where it's some type of customized hardware that you're needing to build, that's where it's like I think you have to really make a decision whether or not you're a VC that's focused on customized hardware, or you're focused on companies like ourselves that use standardized types of hardware solutions, and then really our bread and butter and our secret sauce at the end of the day is the software that we have that interacts with that hardware. And I mean, and even if you look at it too, though, like our Flex Connect platform can be done software only, so you don't necessarily need the edge device that's in there. But as a manufacturer, you do need to have some of the hardware that's already sitting within there. So it's kind of like a catch-22. Would you rather provide them a full, hey, here's everything that you need, or would you want to put it on the customer to say, you need to be able to go get those things? If they already have them, great. But if they don't, we have it for you too. So it's a way for you're able to provide an actual like kind of holistic solution for them.
The parts of your business that are not SaaS subscription model, pricing becomes really critical because it's a one-shot deal. As a newer company, how did you approach pricing as your product offerings developed? Because with a lot of these things, you kind of get one shot with a customer when you decide on a pricing for it. How did you approach that? Because also there's not a tremendous amount of visibility into the pricing of various vendors in the industry. Anytime I hear a hard dollar amount on anything, I'm like magnetized to it, because it's so rare that you get a real concrete pricing touch point on something without an ongoing customer relationship with a vendor. So how did you approach pricing as a newer entrant, given there's so little visibility in the space?
Yeah, I mean, I think the largest thing, right, is that if you're selling this as an accessory onto something, you have to look at what the price is of the thing that you're an accessory to, right? Like you buy an iPhone, if the charger was the same price as the iPhone, people would find different ways. They'd find different chargers they would use. They wouldn't use, even as much as Apple's chargers are incredibly expensive. People would find different ways to go about it. So you have to base that decision off of, what is it selling in conjunction with. So we use that as a kind of like compass to guide us. And then in the other end is you look at, what's the value prop of this, right? Like, what is this providing? And if like you look at, for Flex reference, value prop is that you're increasing utilization of that robot. So you can look at, the capital equipment investment that you made on that robot, and you can look at the productivity of the different work cells that it's working on. So if you increase utilization in both of those areas, you're able at the end of the day to get, significant types of productivity increases and labor reduction costs that are associated with it. So you just take that and, kind of do a calculation based off that, and then like any type of ROI, you want it to be a certain multiple less of whatever the ROI that you have for it. So we use those two things, and and then with capital equipment purchases, as much as it might be difficult on that first sale to get that customer convinced, we see much more adoption of automation. So that second, third, fourth, fifth, 10th robot comes a lot quicker, and that customer's already trained up on it, so the support's much easier on the back end of it. So it definitely pays itself off as you go along and you train that customer up to be an expert on it.
All right. Well, you've been very generous with your time. I have plenty more questions I'd love to ask, but maybe we'll have to do it again someday if I can convince you.
Have you back on the show. I had a great time, Kevin.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much for joining me. If folks want to get in touch, what would be the best way to reach out?
Yeah, so hit me up on LinkedIn, Tyler Bouchard, Bouchard. Usually I'm pretty active on there, so you can shoot me a message, connect with me, and if you want, also you can go to the website. Flexxbotics.com. That's 2 X's, so FLEXXBOTICS.com. Go there, check out what we have, and reach out over email there.
All right, wonderful. It was great having you. Thank you a lot.
All right, thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Thanks
Bye.
so much. Bye.